take me home, take me on a ride. I got a good feeling about the colors lighting up your eyes. Take me home, take me to the sky. I got a good feeling. Tell me the only thing you are is mine now. I got a good feeling. I got a good feeling. Good feeling. I got a good feeling.
I'm Blanche.
I'm LaRonda.
And we're very excited that you tuned in today for our third episode of Blind Grace. Today we are going to be talking about barriers and street crossings. So we're going to back up a little bit and talk about what we do. So we are called an orientation mobility specialist. And so you're probably like, what in the world is that? For short, it's O&M instructor. So basically there's maybe 6 of us in the state left,
I
right?
don't think there's 6 because a couple people left recently.
Okay. A lot of people have retired. So a lot of people think that we just walk around all day for a living. That's what we do. We just walk around.
Right.
But actually what we do, both of us actually went to the same university. We did. Years later, we went to the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. We were Trojans. And so we spent the summers in Arkansas actually doing blindfold training. So basically what we do is we teach anywhere from 0 to 99 how to travel independently using a cane, or it could be some other type of device, which we can get into. So what made you get into O&M?
There's no cute way to say this, to be honest. Like, we could dress it up, like, but there's no need for that. Literally, it was a suggestion from my mother. And I know many of us probably don't be wanting to listen to your mama at the age of like 18, 19. But I was at a really low point, if that makes sense. Like, just not knowing where to go, what to do. I had been praying for discernment for a long time. And when my mom brought up O&M, she was just like, oh, well, you know, if you do O&M, I know you don't like being inside. You can work outside all day. I was like, that sounds good. And she was like, you know, you have a boss, but you don't really have a boss because you create your lessons. You implement the lessons. You write up. I'm like, ooh, that sounds real good. And then the more she talked about it, it just kept like checking off boxes for me. And I often remembered a student that she had. So working in this field, a lot of the times, as you know, like, you might get a baby at 3 or 4 and you literally have them until they graduate high school. So because of that, that child kind of becomes a part of your family. I remember her very first VI student, like, I know the mom, the dad, the sister. I called her grandma, mama. Her uncle would look for me at Christmas. Like, we just got very entrenched in their family. And the more she talked about it, she would often reference that student. And I was like, yo, but it is kind of cool, right? Like, figuring out not only how you can give information, but how a person can take it and then implement it, and then you can see that implementation immediately, right? Oftentimes we do things in life, like we talked like on, I think the last episode, the one before, like, you plant that seed, but you got to get that bad boy water. You got to give him sun. You got to give it attention. You might have to talk to it a little bit for it to grow. Versus with O&M, I find I teach you this skill and I can immediately see you implementing it into your life. And I like to be able to see that immediate transition as well. So yeah, if we're being real, if I had to make that answer short and sweet, I had a real low moment. My mama gave me a suggestion that sounded good, and here I am.
Which again brought us together because you used to volunteer with your mom before you actually came and became an intern and worked with us. And so mine was a little bit different. And so I told you on one of the previous episodes about why I had kind of gotten into the field. Well, one of my brother's, one of his best friends, his mom was a teacher in Lafayette Parish, and she was telling me about the shortage of not only the O&Ms, but the TVI, the teacher of the visually impaired. And so, you know, my senior year of college, I had to pick an internship, and that's when Affiliated Blind was the very first one. And, you know, it, again, you know, God reveals when it's time. And so I was like, okay, so I finished undergrad, and then I immediately went in to my master's to work on that for O&M. And so today's episode is going to be a little bit more about kind of the barriers and stuff. So we've been pretty fortunate. We've actually been working with DOTD, and we've done some sensitivity trainings, and we've been able to kind of get to the engineers before they start to build some of the things. But one of probably the biggest obstacles is the truncated domes. And for those of y'all that may not know what those are, we call them the Braille dots. So basically, those are the elevated yellow dots in front of like Walmart, street corners and stuff like that. And so a lot of times what will happen is you have this perfect little rectangle truncated dome, and we're here trying to teach the kids how to line up with it, when in fact it's at a diagonal.
And not a straight.
And not straight. And so then that puts the kid completely, you know, across. So learning how to adapt and do things like that. One of the things I think one of the other bigger barriers, and I'm gonna back up a little bit and talk about, so when we get to street crossings, the kid has a lot more advanced skills. And so we, you know, going back to the 0 to 3, we teach them concepts, we talk about crawling, we talk about walking, and then, you know, we do school settings, then we do residential, then we do public transportation, and then we do, you know, more of the downtown street crossings. And so one of the other biggest barriers is construction.
Yes.
You know, I mean, for those of y'all that might be outside of Louisiana and listening, I mean, Louisiana has a lot of construction, and so you may teaching someone around, and then all of a sudden they're pulling up the road, and you're having to reteach them. So construction is a really big thing. So setting up cones and setting up construction tape. If there's a giant hole in front of us, that's not going to stop that visually impaired person that is going down, you know, minding their business. It may not stop them from knocking over whatever, you know, things like that. So making sure that you are aware of barriers and street furniture and putting up things, I think that's probably one of the biggest things when we teach a street crossing.
If I had to talk about barriers, like, especially if we're like scaling it all the way back, right, to the beginning of when I'm first introducing a cane to a person, a really big barrier for me is probably like acceptance. And when I say that, I don't just mean the world accepting my student or client. I really mean more so of the student and the student's family accepting the necessity of this cane, right? Like, I have kids on my caseload right now that are like 15, 16 years old. They're trying to learn a skill that their family is telling them they don't even need. So if you come here for 7 hours in a day and I'm telling you it's needed, but when you go home for the rest of them, and they're like, oh no, you don't need that. Everything that we're trying to do is kind of being rolled back on. So I think acceptance is a really, really big barrier, especially when the people around you don't recognize the necessity of your tool. That acceptance can be family, it can be friends, it can be classroom environments, it can be systems, whatever, like, you know, your job, all of those things. I think that until we get past that, there's nothing that can be done, you know. I definitely agree when we're talking about advanced skills, about truncated domes and construction being a big one. I think oftentimes whenever construction is quote unquote covered, right, or we put up protective measures for construction, we're really only thinking about people that can see. If you notice, it's usually 4 poles. If this is the corner, we got a pole here, 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 and here. So the sidewalk is actually totally open, and they put one piece of caution tape right about your chest level. Well, if I'm walking and I cannot see those things, by the time I come to what's supposed to protect me, it's already too late. I'm in a hole. Because my cane didn't come across anything. If we're being real, putting one cone around the hole still does nothing. Because if I cannot see that cone, when my cane hits it, I'm going to assume it's an obstacle to go around. So if I go around the wrong way, guess what? I'm in a hole, right? Lack of APS systems is a big one for me as well. For those who don't know what APS systems are, those are actually the automated signals that you'll hear when you're crossing a street. So sometimes they will literally say, walk, walk. It may be a bird chirping sound, just different things like that. So some places are really, really advanced and they have them in all their downtown areas. Some places you'll get to, they've never even heard of what an APS is, but that's something that can be used not just for visually impaired child, but for any pedestrian for the purpose of keeping people safe, you know? So I guess not just the lack of APS, the lack of acceptance of new technology is a really, really big issue, especially when it costs money, right? Because everybody wants to save the budget. We can let some lives go, but we gonna save this budget. So I think that's a really big one for me. It's just understanding that life is moving. our technology needs to move. The types of street lights we use need to move. The types of crossings and signals that we have need to move because life is moving. So if you're waiting, only thing that's happening is life is leaving you behind because you won't automatically catch up.
One of the things too I want to touch on is, and look, I really didn't get into the visually impaired community and really know a whole lot about them till, like I said, college. So a lot of the things when we are trying to teach a street crossing and you're in your car, a lot of these individuals might be standing on the street corner and the people are trying to wave them on, or they're trying to honk, or, and look, I get it. I think we finally instilled that, like, Miss Aranda and Miss Blanche are going to be downtown sometimes, and we're going to be, so, if you were at a lesson and you were listening and you see a visually impaired person and you recognize one of them, don't honk, don't yell out the window, but really if you're at a street corner and you are waiting, we teach them to listen for the parallel surge. So if you're waiting and you're waving this person on, you're really undoing what we are teaching them. And so a lot of times it makes the individual, whether they can see you or not, it makes them more nervous. So, whether we're standing behind them or we're trying to get them to do it independently, you waving them on or you honking or you telling them to go is just really undoing because they are listening for the parallel traffic. And so if we're at a lighted intersection and they're waiting for your traffic, which is near, to go, and you're waiting, and then you get impatient, or then you decide, hey, I'm on my phone and not paying attention, and then you go not at the beginning of the parallel surge, then, that is, then the individual is trying to cross the street whenever that light is already yellow or red. So that's one of the biggest, I would say, another big barrier when we're trying to do street crossings. I agree.
I think it goes back to like something that we spoke about before. Like, people think they're being helpful, but they're actually not being helpful. So because they cannot see, they are trained to use the auditory sound. So if your car is not moving, you are not giving them their signal. So the best thing they can do in those situations is just, light turns green, you drive. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like I said, we train them to make sure that car is stopped and then to go with the start of that surge. And so, that's probably another thing. Can you think of any other barriers? I know you were downtown a lot more with some of the individuals. What are some other barriers?
So if we're being real, I think another really, really big one for me is outside of people just walking up and once again offering unsolicited help. Yes. Another really big one for me is one of those things I'm kind of caught, like you're 6 one way, half a dozen another, is people coming up asking questions. Yes. During a lesson, right? So yes, I want to be able to not just myself, but to have my students engage with the community. But depending on where we're at in this lesson, now we're going to spend 30 minutes with them talking to you, or you attempting to engage with me, which now means that we drove downtown just to drive back to the school. Right. So that's why I'm kind of like split, between a dilemma, because I love the fact that the community wants to engage and that these people are bold enough to ask questions. Right. Because oftentimes what we get is blank stares. Right. And I have to remind people, hi, it's not a zoo exhibit here. Take a picture, it lasts longer. So just being able to engage the community, I truly enjoy it. But I really, really wish there's a way that people could figure out when there's a lull, a lull in the lesson, to be able to ask questions and engage in different things like that. Because sometimes it really is at an extremely inopportune time. Many times it's when I believe a student has gotten to a point that they don't need me to cue them across the street, right? So I'm standing back. They're listening for traffic, and as soon as they're about to get that traffic, somebody comes up and starts talking to them. Right. So it's like, yo, you slowing down progress. But once again, you are engaging with the kids.
Right. And I do think a lot of it too is curiosity. You know what I'm saying? And some of the things in the past, and I think, if you're listening to this, I think it's really important if you have an organization or if you have a group, we've done some sensitivity training where we'll put you under the blindfold, we'll use the goggles, and I think that has helped. We've done it at hotels where we have a convention coming in. We've done it with younger kiddos. I've done it at nursing homes. And so I do think the general public is curious. I do think they are curious. They, and a lot of them just don't know any better. And so, it kind of goes back to you as a parent, if you're listening, you really want to take that teachable moment, and, if you are crossing the street and you're holding their hand, obviously when they're still little is, you know, maybe you can have a friendly conversation and let them know that, like, you know, we're waiting and we're listening for the traffic, you know, we're not just walking together, so that it sparks those conversations and things like that. So like I said, I think barriers and street crossings is probably one of those that I wish that we could educate as many people as possible. You know, we've been pretty fortunate to be able to do some public transportation and put some people under the blindfold and stuff, but I think, you know, getting out there is something. And two, you know, around October is National White Cane Safety Month. This year we're going to be celebrating it a little bit earlier around some deafblind awareness, but I do think that, you know, is one of the big things that we'll touch on, you know, a little bit later about white cane and what is the whole symbol behind the white cane and what it symbolizes and what it's used for. So like I said, we'll be able to touch that on another episode.
Actually, I'm really excited for that one, yo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you all for tuning in for our third episode, and we can't wait to see y'all next month.
Bye.